over scavenging prevention. I did discuss a little bit more advanced option of this at the virtual puppy raiser conference, and some of the feedback I got was, let's break it down to be more simple. So I am going to give you some information that will make it a lot easier, and some tips that I followed over the years as a puppy raiser, and a method that I use for teaching when we're discussing scavenging that works really well for me. So I like to follow and teach the 3-2-1 rule. And what that means is it is marking and feeding 3 times before you start moving again. And you should only take 2 steps at a time, and you want to have a 1 management plan ready. So we're going to be going over this, but remember that every dog we have in our program is going to face scavenging opportunities, whether they're in a home, and they're working in a facility, they're working as a guide dog, skilled companion. Every dog is faced with these situations. So we're going to go ahead and go over some of this stuff. All right. So what are some management options that we can use? And you can just kind of call them out. What are some management options that we can use and share with our puppy raisers in a scavenging situation?
Collar control.
Yep, the infinity collar. 3Ds are distance, duration, distraction. We have our hand tether, so when we have the leash in our hand, we can plant our hand on our thigh and create that hand tether. Emergency lure. Your food delivery can actually do this. If anyone's attended one of my virtual classes, you know I talk about using your food delivery to set the dog up for the next success. So we can talk about that as I give the demo. Using a high-pitched voice, so that's part of the distraction. Puppy, puppy, puppy. I'm not, okay, everyone's looking at me now. Stuff like that. And then practicing easy cues that your dog is successful at. If your puppy is really great at following a fist target, you can use the fist target. Practicing if they're really good with their hand prompts, their visual cues, you can practice some visual cues and kind of reset them. But we want to have our management in our mind already. We don't want to kind of go in blind and not ready and prepared, because that's not setting us up for success. So if I'm walking and I see my plate of food that I put on, that will be on the ground when I give my demo, I'm not just going to be walking towards it without a plan. I'm going to be like, okay, if the puppy starts showing more interest, what can I do to set myself up for success and set my puppy up for success? And I'm going to grab a puppy I'm not familiar with, so I might have to play around and see what management works. All right, so we use management for a couple of different reasons. The environment is always different, and we want to set the dog up for success. And like I'm sorry, I forgot to skip that last time, or this slide. I apologize. So we are using management that helps prevent the behavior from becoming an ingrained habit. And we don't want the dog to come in for training with their nose on the ground, sniffing everything. We want them to be able to practice impulse control and avoid those scavenging behaviors. There's tons of reasons to use management. If you or your dog are over their learning threshold, so if like both of y'all are tired or one of y'all is tired, you can go ahead and use management to completely avoid a training session. If you don't have enough time, if you are heading to the doctor's office, you've got to make an appointment, and you're walking and there's food dropped near a public trash can, and you're like, I got to be there in 10 minutes, that's not the time you're going to use to practice a training session. You might use an emergency lure to walk the puppy by. You might use the fist target, anything like that. It might not be a safe option or location. Chicken bones are very common in Atlanta, and those are not safe to practice scavenging with a new puppy, because if they eat that or swallow it, chicken bones are very likely to shatter. So that's not something I'm going to be like, oh man, we're really going to practice some scavenging here. it's just not worth it to me. We also want to set the dog up for success, because if they do get to that option, they're trying to scavenge the food, whatever, and they get it, they're going to remember it. It was really reinforcing for them to get it. It was new, novel, tasty, whatever, and they wanted to snack, and then everything on the ground becomes a potential reinforcer for them. So if we have a dog that is really sniffy and scavenges a ton, the more they get reinforced by the things on the ground, the more they're going to keep trying to do that behavior. All right. So our end goal for practicing this is for the dog to successfully do it. You know, we practiced our distraction blitz earlier, and we really utilize the tools that I'm going to be utilizing up here as well. And we also want to have an intentional pattern for the dog to understand and anticipate. Pattern games are great ways for our dogs to provide predictable behavior for us. So I want to create a predictable pattern game for them as well. So that's why that's taking those 2 steps. So we have our one piece of management we're going to use, and then we're using those 2 steps. This is really tricky for a lot of puppy raisers. Even if I say 2 steps to a puppy raiser, all of a sudden it becomes 5 or 6, and they're letting the dog kind of lead them towards that distraction. And it becomes this situation that the dog is really in control of where the next movement is. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll be standing next to the person. I will take 2 steps, and I show them. I'm like, all right, I'm taking it kind of like a processional. I'm not just like walking, because that gives that movement for the dog to continue with me. So I want to be very intentional with the steps that I take. The dog knows, okay, she did the first one, all right. She did the next one, she paused, and they start getting that pattern. So I'm going to show that to you as I continue. And that pattern just really sets the dog up for success. If you have someone that's struggling and allowing the dog to kind of keep walking towards the distraction, that's where you can really utilize different visual cues. It can be, okay, I want you to stop at the purple pom-pom. Okay, now we've had our 3 marks, so now I want you to skip this one and go to the next one. So I have my 2 steps. So you can give those visual markers to puppy raisers that are really struggling with taking just 2 steps. And as you progress, you can use multiple steps and continue walking a more, predictable, realistic pattern. I also use sticky notes. I keep a roll of painter's tape in my training bag, and those little low cone things you can get at Target, a pack of 20 for $5 or whatever. And I can use those too. Okay, stop at the yellow cone, stop at the red cone, and they're really low. They're small. They're not full cones, so they fit in your bag as well. So then the steps that you take can be extended as the dog and the human learners in the class are succeeding at the 3, 2, 1 rules. Okay, so we want to be marking the dog 3 times, and there's a couple of key points in there. We want to be marking while stationary, so we're taking the 2 steps and then we're pausing. And that also is building a predictable pattern for the puppy, and that's a tongue twister. And it slows everything down. It gives you a chance to say, okay, what does my puppy look like next to me? Are they taking the treats really hard? Are their ears and their eyes just really zoned into that distraction? Or are they able to pull themselves away from that distraction and focus on me? Marking 3 times doesn't mean you should move after the 3rd one. Sometimes I have to stay there for 3, 6, 19, 20 times to work with the puppy, and that's perfectly fine. We don't mind the fact that the puppy is needing a little more time. It gives us more time to assess, do I need to move farther away from that distraction? Do I need to move it to the left or the right instead of being head on? So there's definitely a lot that you can practice and learn and observe while you're marking and feeding in stationary. And like I said, if the dog is struggling, maybe I'm on like my 20th mark and feed and we're just not getting it, and the dog is just the second they're done with the piece of food, they're just zoned in on the distraction, then that means we need to utilize our management, our physical space, our food lure. Maybe it's not the right time to train and we're just gonna walk past that opportunity. But helping raisers recognize that the marking and feeding and taking more time is setting themselves up for success. Really prevents that scavenging from becoming the habit, which is what we're trying to avoid, right? So we're going to go over applying this to meetings, and then I'm going to give a demo and kind of show you how I apply this 3-2-1 rule when I'm teaching and working on scavenging with dogs. So you're going to, just like in our, and Carrie really set me up for this well with the scaffolding training, we're going to be mindful about the location that we are teaching. You're not going to be teaching this with really tight aisles at a shopping center where it's really busy. You might choose a Lowe's or Home Depot. The lumber aisles are usually much wider, and they're really good for this exercise. A park pavilion, you can be set up in a circle or a semicircle and practice walking, and you have enough space to move around the distraction instead of straight towards it. Working on a sidewalk in a quiet area. Again, you're not going to want to work downtown Charleston and be like, all right, this is the spot we're going to do this while everyone's walking around you. You can practice in empty business parks or parking garages. Again, those are great spaces. They're usually open. Just be mindful that you're not picking, a busy weekend when there's an event. We also want to really focus on when we're introducing this and focusing on scavenging prevention, that we're not adding a ton of other distractions so the dog becomes trigger stacked. We just want to focus on this one thing. So avoiding a spot with busy traffic, lots of other dogs and crowds. And then as your group matures with this skill, or you're teaching a class with some older dogs, stuff like that, that might be a better opportunity to add in those distractions. So you want to explain the training, set up the distractions so every dog can go through it. So just like in our scaffolding exercise that we all broke out and practiced, even if the distractions are in the same place for every dog, your puppies can do different activities with them, walking to the left and to the right of them, and then turning back around and being done, weaving in and out of them, practicing obedience. You want to demonstrate with a puppy in your group. I always pick a puppy that the puppy raiser looks maybe a little frazzled, or the puppy is struggling, or they've mentioned to me that their dog is scavenging. So you ask if a raiser can give a demo after you do it. So you're showing, hey, I did this, now we're going to have another raiser do it, and then we're going to practice it together. And one thing I really love about the group classes when I'm teaching stuff like this, where it's we can really break it down and practice one at a time, is we're learning from each other. So we can ask our puppies that aren't actively practicing to settle near us, and then we can watch how each puppy is doing it. I really love being able to watch and give feedback, and even in my virtual classes when we're practicing distractions and scavenging, I'm like, hey, I'm going to spotlight this person really quick because look at what they're doing to set their puppy up for success. Or I've even said, it really looks like Fido is struggling, so let's pause, everyone else take a break, and we're going to work through setting this dog up for success. It's not calling them out in the way where it's negative, but I'm like, hey, we all see that you're struggling here. Let's get you on the same page as us and see how we can set you up for success. So during the stationary feeding time, you can ask the group questions and really help them support the other raisers. Like, all right, it's time to move again. What direction would you take with that puppy? And ask why. So it might be, it's a new puppy raiser and the puppy raiser isn't sure. You can call on a more experienced puppy raiser. what direction would you take? Would you go forward, right, left, backwards? And give them an opportunity to explain and really support the other less experienced puppy raisers. You can ask for management, why they would choose that management, and you can always just ask for if they would do something differently. It's always a great conversation to have with puppy raisers because we're all learning from each other. We're all learning new things. I learned new things today during our breakout session. So, and then of course, we always have a puppy that does manage to lunge towards something. And if that happens, it's just supporting the puppy raiser and walking them through the management so they can prevent that from happening again. Okay, and then at the end of the meeting, you wrap up how this applies to real life, like walking through restaurants, movie theaters. Those are like the epitome of scavenging opportunities. Pet stores, parks, reminding the raisers when they can use management and utilize that management, and when they should practice those training sessions. Not everything you see on the ground is a good opportunity for training sessions. And then you can always ask your group to set up training sessions at home. Okay, I want to see y'all share videos in our Facebook group or our group chat or whatever, and practicing with a new distraction at home and see how it goes. So before I do a quick demo, does anyone have questions? No? Okay, well then I will jump into the demo. So is there a dog that I can, Josie? Okay. And what is your puppy's name? Okay, great. So because this dog doesn't know me, I'm just luring them past the other dogs and delivering that food once I get past them. Is that pretty good? So she's probably not aware that there's a plate of food running around, right? But she's already scavenging and sniffing around. So what I'm going to do is mark and feed her 3 times to build that reinforcement history.
Are you marking?
What was the question?
You're marking.
Yes, yeah. She's like, keep it coming, lady. Yes. And because she seemed a little jazzed about the floor, I'm actually just going to mark and feed her 1 or 2 more times. So what do you think my management should be in this scenario? So we saw her, she walked really nicely past the other dogs, and then when she came up here, she started kind of snuffling. So what should my management be?
2 steps. Your 2 steps.
The what?
Doing the 2 steps.
The 2 steps. Okay, the 2 steps are already in the plan. So what management? The hand tether? Yeah. So I would do the hand tether with her because I'm keeping my hands relaxed, but there's not a lot of room for her to get away from me. So that hand tether prevents any more movement and getting to the ground. What do you think? Yes. Good girl. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my 2 steps. Yes. And I'm marking and feeding her for stopping next to me. Yes. Yes. So this time, because we're approaching the plate of food, I'm actually going to walk towards the edge of the stage. Yes, good girl. I know, she's taking her time. Yes. So the thing about this is I'm not immediately rushing towards that distraction. I'm building a reinforcement history with this dog. She doesn't know me. She has no clue what I have to offer. So now we're going to walk forward again. And she noticed it. Yes. But she's more interested in the pattern game that I'm playing with her. She's like, this lady walks weird and then stops and gives me food. So that's kind of fun. You shopping? Yes. All right, so now I'm gonna walk diagonally towards this trash can. The food is going to be on her side. So instead of just allowing her to make this choice, I'm already gonna hand tether her while I walk. So I'm setting myself up for success, and I'm not gonna get pulled towards that. So I'm gonna kind of make an arc as I walk. I have really big steps, so those kind of make it easy to take some space. Yes. Good. So this gives me a chance to see her body language. Yes. Near the food, she's still relaxed. She's playing this game with me. Yes. And now we're going to walk towards the chairs. So she noticed that food. So again, I have my hand tethered. It's not tight. I'm not up. I'm just relaxed. Yes. I marked and fed as she air scented and then stopped and looked up at me. Yes. So do you think I should move forward now? I've marked her 3 times. No. So yeah, so back towards y'all. That's smart, because if I moved forward, then I would be right there. And she knows that this is there now. She's very aware that there's some good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and move this way. Good girl. Yes. Good. But you can see she's anticipating now as I'm taking those 2 steps. She's like, all right, yeah, this is fun. I just 2 steps and then I stop and get food. So yes. So now I'm actually going to turn that way and make it challenging for her and see what happens, because she's proven that she's keeping in line with me. She's engaged with what I'm doing. She's interested in the game I'm playing with her. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that way. Let's go. Yes. Good girl. So I gave her a little interrupter. So because I made it harder, I'm going to go ahead and move back. So you can see in a group class, you don't necessarily have to do it one at a time. You can have like several distractions and move through the line together. And what happens, so I'm going to let her make a choice. Yes, good girl. And we're going to walk forward. Yes, good girl. Good girl. Thank you. I know, it's right there. That's pretty good. So one thing that works really well is having, what you can do is have an experienced puppy raiser kind of lead the line, have a couple distractions, because if you have someone that's following the person that knows what to do, you're not going to get a pile up, you're not going to get rushing towards the next distraction. Where sometimes if we get nervous about the exercise, we're like, oh gosh, we have to get through it, and you just kind of rush, and then you see puppy raisers pulling their dog, cranking their dog around. But if we do this really intentional exercise, it gets easier and easier. So then it's, okay, instead of 2 steps, let's take 3 steps. And our older puppies that are ready move closer to the food. And the puppies that are younger can just stay on the path that they're going. So then it can progress to something like this. You ready? So I took 4 steps, but as soon as I stopped, she knew exactly what she was going to get, and that was food for me. So that makes it a lot easier. Let's go. Oh, yes. So the second I'm stopping, she's aware of what I want her to do, which is stop with it. She's not moving forward. She's not trying to get to the food. You ready? Let's go. Good girl. So I'm using my management. Good job. Yes. And I was able to quickly progress. And again, she's an older puppy, she knows. But this is one of my favorite exercises to teach and introduce in puppy class when we're working on scavenging. So now that y'all have seen it, do you have any questions? Okay. What is your question?
So I guess I thought when they looked and looked away, they were mark and treat. But when she looked and looked away, even though it was only step 1, you didn't mark that. You waited until step 2. So
Yeah, so I was teaching a pattern to her that would be predictable. You only get food after I've stopped. Excuse me, you only get food after you've stopped on steps. So that nice little step, we're almost like chaining it together. So it's like, wow, you can take a step and look at the food and then look away and take another step with me. And if she were a younger puppy and really jazzed about this, then it might have been we were only taking one step. Not while I'm moving. Only when I'm stopped. When I'm playing this, when I'm doing this exercise in this game, it's only when I'm stationary. And then you can progress it to walking and feeding or doing multiple steps or noticing in a different pattern. But by building a pattern first, you're creating that really predictable response from them. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
2 questions. What are you giving her so that she's chewing?
I'm giving her crunchy O's.
The whole one?
I am giving her a whole one.
Okay.
So if she were, if it were, we were doing this for a long period or she was my dog, I might break it up
Yeah.
so it's smaller.
The other thing, you're training for on-leash, not scavenging.
Yes.
If she were to be loose in a room at the home of a friend, she would be a hoover.
Okay.
How do I deal with that? Management?
Management, yes, but also, okay, go to a friend's house or use a long line. So it's, can we practice this when we're on a long line and advance it? So now I don't really have as much management. And she's starting to snuffle around.
Nose to the ground.
But then you can play that game again. Oh, you didn't stop it. Where are you going? Yes. So see, that time she stopped with me. So you can practice this game and build it up, and then eventually, but it takes training. So if you know that a dog is going into an environment and going to do something, like I was talking to Paula, her puppy whines when they're at church. So it's, okay, well, she has that habit of whining in church. So now can I take one part of that concept out? So it's, can I go to church on a Tuesday and practice? Can I go to church on a Monday morning and practice? So it's, can I go to your friend's house and do a training session and then hang out? And sometimes it's not possible, and that's where management comes in. All right, when you come to that friend's house and you like to hoover because they have other dogs that have treats out and stuff like that, all right, well, you got to stay on a leash when you're here with me. So, any other questions? All right, I think that Sandy is next.